Bring in someone else who some consider one of those potential 2020 challengers, but first he needs to win re-election. In 2 weeks, Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio. Also with us for this conversation is Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Susan Page. Good to have you, Susan. Congressman Ryan, first of all, how's your election looking 2 weeks in, 2 weeks away?
It's going good. We're working hard, campaigning on what we've done the past 16 years and turning around cities like Youngstown, Ohio, like Akron, Ohio, a lot of the positive things, trying to diversify our economy, but also what we're fighting for. And it is health care, it's pensions, it's making sure that young kids have an opportunity to live in our community, and if they've moved away, to be able to come back by making sure we have high-tech jobs being developed, whether it's around the energy sector or additive manufacturing sector. So, we're excited to campaign about that, but we're also trying to help other candidates around the country to win a Democratic majority.
So what do you think is happening 15 days out? Why aren't the polls wider apart for the Democrats? What happened to this blue wave that everyone was, I guess, maybe hoping for or predicting? Is it there?
Well, these races, if you look, you can't really take the national statistics. You have to look at them race by race by race.
Right.
And a lot of these races across the board that are considered, quote unquote, toss-up races, very, very close. They're within a point or two one way or the other. And this is going to be an election about turnout. And I think what you're seeing in these House races are gerrymandered districts where we are extremely competitive. Look at Danny O'Connor in Columbus, Ohio. He almost won a special election, which is a Republican plus 10 seat. Connor Lamb won a Republican plus 20 seat in Western PA. So we are doing extremely well in some of these communities and some of these congressional districts, and it's all going to get out the turnout. So if you're worried, if you're concerned, if you're a Democrat, you need to go start knocking on some doors. We can't send tweets out or do social media posts. We got to go old school grassroots campaigning, and that's getting our voters out to vote and out to the polls. And
Tim, are you worried?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. I've never thought there was this big blue wave that was going to come. I mean, I'm from Ohio. I've seen the redistricting process over the last couple of decades, and these are really, really hard districts for us to win. Fortunately, we've got really, really good candidates. We've got a lot of veterans that are out there running, people talking about manufacturing. The national narrative, Mika, is much different than what our candidates are talking about. No one in Youngstown, Ohio is talking about impeachment. No one in Youngstown, Ohio is talking about Russia. They're talking about how they're going to make ends meet. They're talking about potentially losing their pension. Here's a great example. Look at Senator Sherrod Brown. He's doing extremely well in the polls right now. I think up 7, 8, 9, 10 points, depending on the poll. What's he talking about? He's talking about jobs. He's talking about pensions. He's talking about health care, bread and butter issues that most people can understand and that they're thinking about when they go to bed every night, whether their kids are sick, their spouses are sick, all of those issues.
Right.
He's talking about them, and he's winning. And I hope that's a recipe for Democrats across the country as to what they should be talking about.
Nick Confessori and then Susan Page. Nick, go ahead.
It's fascinating. I'm wondering, what we see here around the country is a decline in enthusiasm or a lack of power from Hispanic Americans. And what's fascinating to me is Democrats were kind of hoping that was in the bag, right? That with this president and his policies on the border and immigration, that there would, of course, be a huge outpouring, but it's not there. So what do Democrats not understand yet about this group of Americans and potential voters?
Well, I think, we should have learned from 2016. President Trump did as well, if maybe slightly worse, than Mitt Romney did among Hispanic voters. So the reality of it is, yes, Hispanic voters, they vote on immigration. Guess what else? They want a job. They want a pension. They want health care for their kids. They want opportunity for their kids. That's why a robust economic message, not that we can't talk about and advocate and be for all these other justice issues, which are obviously critically important. We want everybody to participate in a growing economy and have the opportunity not to be discriminated against. But a robust economic message. How are we going to make your life better, regardless if you're white, black, brown, gay, straight? We're talking about your pocketbook every single day. And as I said, Sherrod Brown does this, and he's doing really well in a purple state like Ohio.
Congressman, it's no surprise that party voters come home when you get close to the election. So everybody knew that there'd be some tightening of the big Democratic edge that we saw a couple weeks ago. But I wondered if you think that the Brett Kavanaugh hearings actually were kind of a break point that has really help the Republicans as they go into these final few weeks of the campaign. Did that make a big difference?
I think it did solidify their base. I mean, these judicial appointments with Republicans are a huge issue. I do think it woke up their base. I think we saw that energy level increase in the polls. We had an already energized base on our side for the Kavanaugh issue and a variety of other issues. So I do think it helped tighten things up. Now, there's still 2 weeks left, and there are a lot of really important issues. And I think as long as we pound those issues hard, the economic issues, the issues around health care, I think what Joe said earlier about the tax cut, we should be campaigning on, we're going to repeal 83% of the tax cut. 83% of this tax cut went to the top 1% of the people in the country. That should be repealed, and we're going to take that money and we're going to make sure we protect Medicare. With slight adjustments, we could actually expand Social Security for people who are struggling in many of these communities, and then rebuild the country and use that money to rebuild the country. And I think we should say we want to hold Donald Trump to the promises he made. He said he was going to raise taxes on the top 1%. We're going to give him an opportunity to do that when we get in. He said he was going to expand health care. We're going to give him an opportunity to do that when we get in. He said he was going to rebuild the country and spend $1.5 trillion rebuilding the United States, cleaning the country up. We're going to give him an opportunity to do that. And I think if you stay focused on those issues, our people will come home and we'll be able to persuade a lot of independent voters to say these guys look responsible.
Here's an issue that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. Young married couples, say in late 20s, early 30s, 2 kids, 1 2, 1 4. What are you going to do about them in terms of pre-K for their children, and could, in the tax code, helping them out with daycare costs?
Yeah, I think that's an important issue. Again, these need to be tailored, but part of a larger narrative for us is we're going to have policies that are going to help working class people. If you're working hard, you're playing by the rules, you have a couple kids, we're the party that will be for these kind of tax benefits to help these people. And also, college savings. I mean, you go on and on from there. But these are the people. The mom's a nurse. The dad's a firefighter. They're making $110,000, $120,000 a year. Everything that comes out of our mouth as Democrats should be how we're going to help those people. That's how you rebuild the blue wall. That's how you rebuild Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And if you want to make strides into these southern communities, you're going to have to be talking about those economic issues.
Congressman Tim Ryan, thank you very much for being on the show this morning. He's also the author of the book, Healing America: How a Simple Practice Can Help Us Recapture the American Spirit. Thank you very much for being on. And coming up, President Trump says the U.S. will pull out of the decades-old nuclear treaty with Russia. Gorbachev, who signed the agreement with Reagan, bluntly assessed the decision as, quote, not the work of a great mind. That's ahead on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.